Hello, everybody, and welcome into the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Now, here's the deal for today's show. Our guest today, Nancy Timms, had a bit of an emergency, so she won't be with us today. So here's what we're going to do. We got a two-part show today. First, we'll be joining Jerry Paulley and his wife, Tracy, and we'll be doing a bit of a story swap, a bit of a scary story swap. We'll be talking about different haunted areas of our states, famous haunted areas of our states, or maybe not so famous, maybe infamous areas of our states. Then for the second part of our program, I was turned on to an interesting person by a friend of mine who's got an interesting story about aliens and a different kind of alien, maybe a new one that you haven't heard of. Maybe you have heard of them. It's a newer story to me and a newer theory to me. So Ed Casas is with us in the second part of today's Darkness Radio. We're still getting aliens today, but this is going to be different. Just hang in there, folks. It's coming up right now. So without further ado, here's Jerry Paulley and Tracy from Hillbilly Horror Stories. And here's the little bit of a story swap we did, which is airing on both shows, by the way. It's a little bit of an unprecedented deal, but we're sharing both stories in both podcasts. So here we go. This is Jerry introducing the segment between Hillbilly Horror Stories and Darkness Radio.
Hey guys, I am excited to be doing something different than what we've done in the past. As I've said in the past, if you do 8 years or 10 years, and in Tim's case, sometimes things can get a little bit stale with the same old. So I thought, you know what? It would be fun to do some collaborations with some of our favorite podcasters, keep it as a mutual thing as possible. And our first guest today is going to be Tim Dennis from Darkness Radio. What's going on, Tim?
Hey, Jerry. I was excited when you got a hold of me and you pitched the idea. There's got to be something fresh other than sitting down and just talking to each other and rehashing the same old questions. And when you brought this idea up, I was excited. I'm excited just to sit down and talk to you about what we're going to talk about today. It's kind of a fresh idea, and talking about what's going on in our different states and the different haunted locations is just, to me, something that just kind of sparks my interest. And I think other than you and I just talking about ourselves, I think it's a great idea. So,
and I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I cheated because I said, hey, Tim, why don't you do a story from Minnesota where you're from? And we'll do like one from Kentucky. Yep. And instead I went all the way to Australia because I found something I thought would be great for this. And I didn't stick with the program. No, but for those of you listening out there, of course, Tim, obviously he's from Darkness Radio. They've been around forever. And we are Jerry and Tracy from Hillbilly Horror Stories. So if you're listening on Tim's feed and don't know who we are, that's who we are. Are we ready to get this thing started, Tim?
Can't imagine nobody knows who you are, Jerry. Come on. Or Tracy. Come on. I mean, let's figure it out.
I would like to think that's the case, but listener numbers tell me there's a lot of people in the world who don't know who we are. And my dad would be really quick to point that out.
Oh, come on. Dad doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, I would never say that to his face, but
the first time I told my dad, when we were really first getting started, we were getting like 2,000 listens. And I said, hey, we're getting like 2,000 listens a week. I was all proud of it. And he's like, that's really not a whole lot of people considering how many people were in the world. Okay. I guess touche. So
guess Dad knows how to keep you humble, huh?
He definitely does that. Yeah. So Tim, you got a story from up in your neck of the woods. I'm going to let you go ahead and kick this thing off.
I do. Well, the place I'm going to talk about today, Jerry and Tracy, is a place that's near and dear to my heart. And it's a place that I think a lot of people aren't familiar with in Minnesota. And it's actually number 2 on the Explore Minnesota most haunted places in Minnesota, which you would think, okay, so it's got to be famous. It's got to be the Glen Sheen Mansion, which the Glen Sheen Mansion in Minnesota is one of the most famous haunted places, which is actually owned by the University of Minnesota now. But no, that's not it. You would think it would be the Palmer House Hotel, which has been featured on Ghost Adventures. But no, that's not it either. The place I'm going to talk about is actually a place that when I was the evil general manager and ring announcer for IWI, was a place that I found for our organization to run because it was the perfect wrestling playhouse, so to speak. In other words, it had a great stage to run off of. It had a beautiful screen in which you could play wrestling entrance videos. It had plenty of seating. In fact, we could seat up to 250 to 300 people in it, which for a small independent wrestling organization was perfect. And guys, it was haunted, which is perfect, right? I mean, it's a perfect rib to play on the boys, right? I mean,
Yeah.
And I
icing on the cake.
Right. Icing on the cake. Exactly, Tracy. And I got to play a couple of ribs on the boys because, as you know, wrestlers tend to be a little bit of a superstitious lot and they hate ghosts. So I'm going to tell you a couple of stories about that as well. So let me tell you about the Moundstheater in St. Paul, which is near and dear to my heart. Now, the Moundstheater by now is well over 100 years old. Okay. So it's a nice old movie theater. All right. Now, the Moundstheater sits in East St. Paul. It's an old vaudeville theater in Dayton's Bluff, which is on the east side of St. Paul. Okay. And it was boarded up for about 35 years in somewhere around the 70s or so. They boarded it up. They opened up right around the early 2000s again, and they started playing initially for it's in a poorer neighborhood in St. Paul. And they started playing things like cartoons and old third run, fourth run movies. It was basically, they had an old DVD player that they would play, old DVDs, so you would get to see Lethal Weapon 4, things like that, things that you could get off the DVD shelves, but they would play it for the neighborhood kids or whatever and bring them back into the Moundstheater, and they would charge $1, $2, whatever, just to kind of get things going. Now, the municipality had opened up the Moundstheater as kind of a restoration project or a heritage project. And then they started offering plays. So they started doing things for the community, and it was more of a community project. Well, as it turns out, they found out that it was haunted as well, as they had a few different hauntings that were going on inside the theater. So a paranormal group came in as they found out that it was haunted and decided, you know what? We're going to convince the municipal board that we can run paranormal tours in this theater as well. It didn't go over real well at first, but when they realized that they could make some side money off this, they decided to let them do it. At first, it was only during October, but then they started to kind of do it like quarterly, which turned out to be a little advantageous. Well, when Darkness Radio came around in 2006, we found out that there was a paranormal group that was running tours over there, ghost tours. So we started to do little events over there as well with them. The Twin Cities paranormal group that was over there was as well doing events over there. And it started to get bigger and bigger. So it's still, to this day, it's the activity is ramped down a little bit. There's still local independent wrestling groups that run independent wrestling shows over there. IWI is no longer running, but there's other wrestling groups that are running shows over there. But let me tell you a little bit about the activity that's going on over there, because it's quite interesting and it's quite spooky. I mean, there's some good hauntings and some not good hauntings over there at the theater. So there's allegedly 3 ghosts that are known at the theater. Okay. The first one is relatively mundane. All right. The first ghost is of a happy little girl who bounces a little ball on stage. Now, when you walk into the Moundstheater, when you first walk in, it looks relatively happy. All right. When you walk into the theater, it's got like a little entryway, and you've got like a little concession stand, like an old time concession stand. And they show you like an old time projector. I mean, really old time. We're talking like, 20s, 30s. And when you walk to your left, you have this concession stand, and they serve everything. They serve beer, wine, popcorn, candy. They even have hot dogs. And when you walk to the right, there's just this expansive lobby. I mean, it just, you open up and it kind of goes down on a slope, which was a bit of an issue when we were trying to set up a wrestling ring. We figured out a way to level it. But you go down on a slope and it has this beautiful lobby. I mean, you're talking, I think it was built in 1910 or 1915. The building was, if I remember right. But on the wall, they have this giant curtain, giant navy curtain on the right-hand side. And the building is probably a good 100 feet tall. So, I mean, we're talking giant theater, but one screen, right? So you see the screen in front of you, this giant screen in front of you. But to the left, you've got kind of an old-fashioned, it's like a stage or a lobby, a side stage. And it almost looks like it's perfect. We used to set up wrestlers with their merchandise on that left-hand side. Keep that in mind, because that left-hand stage comes in handy later on in our tale. Because we did have concessions over there, and there's something haunted that's over there. All right. Now, the stage is in front of you. There's a stage and then there's a screen. Okay. So the stage is where they would perform plays, and that stage is where that little girl is. Now, if all is quiet, when people first come in, when they first file in, you can imagine this. If you sit and you're quiet enough, sometimes you can hear that little ball bounce. And I would have people come in for IWI who would say, "Do you hear a ball bounce?" And I would say, "No, I don't hear a thing." Right? But you could hear it when people first come in, the first couple of people. What's interesting is we would hold events and we would do things like shows and scares, okay? Because we wanted to try experiments. So what we would do is we would hold an IWI show, and then we would wait for the crowd to file out, and then we would have a ghost hunting event right afterwards. So why we would do this is because we wanted to amp up a crowd and amp up the energy and see if that would feed the ghosts, and then we would ghost hunt afterwards. And you'd be amazed what kind of events or what kind of results you would get from the event, because it would feed these spirits, and you would get
concept.
Yeah, and you would get results. Let me tell you, brother, you would get results. So one of the results you would get, and one of the first things we would do is we would sit in a circle on the stage, because we would try to get the little girl first, because she would tend to be the shyest of the three of them. Okay, so that would be the first ghost, is this little girl that's on the stage that bounces this ball. The second one is an usher that goes up and down the aisles in search of his lost love. Now, this usher is a little particular in that he doesn't like people throwing trash on the floor. Now, keep in mind, we have a wrestling crowd, okay? So people tend to be a little messy. He also is very particular about certain things, okay? So he's a little tidy, and he's a little, forgive the term, he's a little OCD, okay? I have an interesting tale about this usher. So there were different things. We had to keep in mind, we have the concessions at the top of the building, okay? But then we were allowed to bring in our own concessions. So we brought in pizza by the slice that was supplied by a local pizza restaurant, and they gave us a warmer to use. So keep in mind, we had that little stage off to the side, that little staging area, and they had a power supply off to the left. Now, we had asked them, is there any issues with any fuses on the side? You know, is there anything that will trip or anything if we plug in an extension? They said, no, there's no issues with the building. All the fuses are up to date. There's nothing. We said, okay. So we plugged in an extension cord. We sold hot dogs and pizza. So we had one crock pot that had hot dogs in it, and we had the warmer. Well, the person who was manning the pizza and the hot dogs still had some hot dogs left. The pizza was all sold out. It sold very quickly. Very good pizza. Sold out very quickly, and she turned off the pizza warmer. And I got up at intermission, and I said, unfortunately, folks, the pizza is sold out, but we still have a few hot dogs left. If you want any hot dogs, we've got probably just a few left. They're right over there. They're on sale right now for only $1. And all of a sudden, the light came back on the warmer. And I looked over and I went, like, is there any more? And the person operating the pizza warmer went, it turned on by itself.
Oh my gosh. Nobody
Right.
likes cold pizza, right?
Right. So I was like, so I got down after I had made the announcement that I'm sorry, we only have hot dogs available, blah, blah, blah. I got down, I went over to the staging area and I went, what's going on? And she goes, I don't know. As you were talking, the dial turned by itself and turned back on. Almost like, no, let's, you got to have more pizza. It was weird.
Well, apparently the spirit wasn't in control of that, or you would have had more pizza.
That's right. No, the spirit wanted more pizza, evidently. I don't know. Evidently the pizza was really good, or it liked the smell of pizza, one or the other. So, and that had to have been that usher that was going up and down the up and down the aisle. The other thing is this usher liked to play jokes on the boys when they were setting up the ring. So one of the boys was particularly spooked at the fact that there was ghosts in this building. Okay. I won't say the name of the wrestler, but he didn't like the fact that it was haunted. But keep in mind, we got the building at the time for nothing. Okay. They wanted to draw in business into the building. So I said to him, hey, you know what, brother, we're getting the building for nothing. I mean, and he's setting up the ring and he's like, I don't like it. I don't like it. To me, it's creepy. I didn't get a bad feeling from the building, to be honest with you. I really didn't. The only time I got a bad feeling was in the basement. We'll talk about that spirit here in a minute. So he's bringing in the not 2x4s, but the timbers that go on the ring. So you've got on a ring, you've got the steel frame, and then you've got the timbers, and then you've got the foam, and then you've got the canvas, right? So he's bringing in the timbers that go on the steel frame. Well, it's he and another guy that are bringing in the timbers. And as he's bringing in the timbers, he keeps feeling this tapping on his shoulder. And he turns around and there's nobody there. And he's like, who keeps tapping me on the shoulder? He's getting mad. But he keeps feeling this tapping on his shoulder and there's nobody there. And he's turning around and he's like, I don't want to say it on the show, but he's like, who keeps tapping me on the shoulder? And I'm busting out laughing because I'm sitting here watching it. I went up in the crow's nest. I'm sitting there watching him load in and there's nobody tapping him on the shoulder. Every time he feels a tap, there's nobody behind him. So I know for a fact it was that usher. He was having fun with him.
So Tim, just behind the scenes stuff on these smaller wrestling circuits like that, are the wrestlers the ones who set up the stage and stuff? I mean, not the stage, but the ring.
Yeah, and it tends to be the lower card wrestlers. So it's not the main event wrestlers or even the mid card wrestlers. It's the guys who open up the show.
Okay, interesting. I never really thought about it until just then. I just think you just go there and the ring's just there, but somebody has to put it together.
Yep.
The rim fairy.
Yeah, somebody has to set it up. So it's either them or security, one or the other. But it's mainly the guys who are just starting out, who need to kind of make their bones, so to speak. So it's generally those guys who are setting up the ring.
How long of a process is that to put together a ring?
Well, if the show is at 7:00, a lot of times you're getting there at 2, 3, 4 in the afternoon, because those guys will then set up the ring, and then it's kind of behind the scenes, but they're setting up the ring and then they're going through whatever their matches are. And then we have a meeting to go over what's going on in the show. So,
okay, cool. Now that I've hijacked the show, you can continue on.
No, that's okay. That's okay. It's kind of an interesting process. So yeah. So yeah. And then, probably around an hour before the show, half hour before the show, everybody kind of goes to the back. So, but you give guys enough time to kind of work out their matches and stuff like that. So, yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah, it is. Very much so. Very much so. So that's the usher. The usher will kind of go up and down the aisles too. And I've also heard people say that are sitting in the seats in an IWI show, if someone's unruly, or even if a child is unruly, they'll feel a tap, like they're being told to leave.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Like they're not appreciated. Like if they're throwing too much junk on the floor or they're spilling too much on the floor, they feel a tap on the shoulder, like they're being told to leave. So this usher does not like the fact that.
Yeah, he ain't playing.
No, so that's an interesting ghost as well. So you've got the usher, you've got the little girl. The third ghost that's known in the that you can actually find on the tour is Red, who's a projectionist, who's up in the booth. Now you got the projectionist booth that's up in the catwalk. So you've got a catwalk that goes and is accessible by going up 2 staircases. So when you're in the lobby, you've got a staircase to the right, a staircase to the left that you can go up, and both go up to the projectionist booth and the catwalk that goes around towards a stage. And what's interesting about Red is kind of a cantankerous old man, so to speak. Red is, I found him, if you're respectful to Red and treat him with respect, he's fine. But the minute you try to poke, prod, and cajole, and you're prodding him with questions and who are you and when did you live and how long have you been here, and you try to face off with him, you'll feel cold spots, you'll feel an electric sensation. Red doesn't put up with much crap. He really doesn't. But when I've been up there and I've asked questions, and I've actually gotten a small EVP from him, but it's very short. He doesn't like to answer a lot of questions. And cold spots are common up there in the projection booth. I told him I'm in media, I'm a radio guy. I'm not going to touch the equipment. I'm not qualified to touch the equipment. I understand projectionist is a union job. It's a skilled job. And I'm not qualified to touch this equipment. I respect what you do. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do? Because I'm curious about what you do. And you start to talk his language. He will open up a little bit and talk to you a little bit in an EVP session. But he's not real friendly. So you have to kind of not walk on eggshells around it, but you have to know how to talk his language in order to get him to talk back with you. So Red's an interesting character. He's an interesting character, but he exists up in that projection booth. But you can definitely feel an oppressive presence up there in that projection booth. It's an interesting place and one of the more darker areas. Now, the darkest area, if you're allowed down there, is in the basement. The basement is behind the stage. Now, the reason why they don't necessarily allow people down in the basement is because there's a well and a sump pump down there, and it's a deep well, and it's very dark down there. Oh. Now, if you go with a ghost hunting tour, you can go down in the basement. Now, there is what I believe is an elemental down there. It's not a fully human ghost or spirit. What's interesting is we caught something on an SLS camera. Kevin Swanson, who's a friend of the show, had his SLS camera there. And the only way to describe it is it was a spider-like thing on the SLS. And we had asked it to, we had someone sitting around the sump pump, and we had asked it to show itself, and it came down like this. And someone had asked it to come up and touch them, and it came along like this and went up.
Oh my gosh.
Leg. Yeah. And they said they felt like an electric coldness come up their hand or up their leg and then up their arm. And then they quit giving it permission to touch them. And then it crawled away and went back towards the corner where the sump pump was.
My gosh.
And it was the creepiest thing to watch. And it was recorded on video. But
very cool.
Yeah. But it was creepy. That's for sure.
My goosebumps just hearing about that. I can't even imagine. Hey, come on over here and crawl up my arm, why don't you? And then he does.
Well, they didn't know it was crawling. We didn't tell the person what it was at the time. They just said, if there's a spirit here, you can come up and touch my arm. So they thought it was a human spirit. But this thing came down like a spider, and then it crawled up, right? So as we're watching it, we're trying not to give away. I mean, we've got a poker face on, right? And we're just watching the SLS and watching it crawl up like this. then go up the leg. And they said, oh, my leg is getting cold and it feels tingly and it almost feels like electricity, right? And it's going up the leg and then goes up the leg and kind of goes up the leg here and then kind of goes up the side of the body and up to the arm, right? And then it's like, oh, it's on my arm, it's on my hand,
Mhm.
and it's touching my hand, it's on my hand, but my arm is ice cold and it's feels electric. I don't like this feeling. It feels like it's going numb.
Oh my goodness.
And they're like, get off me, get off me. You don't have my permission to touch me anymore. And they were freaking out. And then that's when this thing goes right off of them and goes back towards the sump pump in the corner in the well and goes back there and stays back there. So it was
Jeez.
just bizarre. It was just weird. It was, I feel
Blah.
talking about it. Yeah. Yeah. But there's definitely something down there. And like I said, I think it's more elemental than anything else. I think it's something that's been with that land for quite some time, but it's not, whatever it is, I don't think it's human. So
Wow.
Nice.
What would you have done, Jerry? Would
What
you
if the
just
thing
let
crawled
it
on
per-
me?
Yeah.
I'd have just laid back and took it because I'm that kind of
Oh,
guy. I'm not going to
yeah,
try to
that kinda
disturb
guy.
anything.
And that was Freddie's whole entire body on the computer. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
no, okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
Probably trying to protect you from whatever that elemental thing was.
Yeah.
That's for sure. That's for sure. So that's
Yeah.
the theater. That's over there in St. Paul. There's other people who have been in the theater have reported flickering lights, strange smells, those cold spots. I don't think there's, other than that thing in the basement, I don't think there's anything too malevolent. It's just spirits that have
Mhm.
been there in the theater in the past. It's nobody reports being scratched or anything like that, or it's just mainly friendly ghosts. But it's a great place to investigate. It's a wonderful old theater, and it always produces. I don't know anybody who's ever gone to the mountains and says they've been skunked.
Wow.
Nice.
We need to check that out for
Yeah.
sure.
Most definitely.
So Tim, before we get into our story,
Mhm.
God, I can't believe there'd be anybody who wouldn't have a clue what Darkness Radio is. You guys have been around for almost 20 years, but um, tell somebody if they wanted to listen to Darkness Radio, how would you describe the show? What are they going to get if they tune in?
Well, on Tuesdays, we do a True Crime Tuesday, which is a little off the beaten path, but True Crime Tuesday also involves paranormal, a little paranormal element at times. It's kind of the idea behind True Crime Tuesday at the time was to combine paranormal elements with true crime. But of course, 52 weeks a year, you can't necessarily do that. So
Yep.
you've got the true crime element there on Tuesdays. On Wednesdays, it's the original supernatural news, which supernatural news includes a bit of a funny element to it because you can't live life and not have a sense of humor. So we combine a little bit of funny with supernatural news, but of course you get your informational element there as well. There's also Parashare, where people write in or leave a voice note and tell their stories, as well of their true paranormal encounters. Thursday, we have a supernatural interview or paranormal interview with someone from the field, whether it be from television, film, an author, someone who's an experiencer, whoever it may be. That's on Thursday. So it's 3 times a week. And really it's quite the fun and informative show. Education, entertainment, and informative. So
That's great.
Yeah.
It's what the
Yeah,
people
it's-
want for sure.
It's
Yeah.
fun. I've had the honor of being on one of the Thursday episodes, year and a half, 2 years back. So it was a big thrill for me, considering that I was listening to Darkness Radio way before I ever thought about starting a podcast. So you guys were pioneers.
And we got to have you back again. Again, this will air as well over at Darkness Radio, but anytime you're welcome.
We
Thank
appreciate
you.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I put Freddie out really
Yes,
quick?
go ahead and
Thank you. Sorry.
put Freddie out. So Tim, Tracy, I dug up a poltergeist story from Australia that, believe it or not, I had never heard of. And I ran across it. And then that's why I suddenly flipped and said, you know what, this would be a really good episode to do with Tim. I don't know if you're familiar with, much of Australia other than the major cities, but there's an area called Nolamara. It's a suburb of Perth in Western Australia. And this story takes place back in the late 1960s. And it basically, this poltergeist terrorized a young family in their home for a decent little period of time. So let me set the scene for you. You got the dad, Liam, his wife, Pat, and then their young child, who was about 18 months old. They move into the home. They had no idea what was about to happen to them. So almost immediately, these strange things started to happen. They just started a new business, so money was a little bit tight. And Liam had told Pat to kind of go easy on the spending, nothing but essentials.
Okay.
Shortly after having this talk, an envelope appeared in their mailbox. In the envelope was a $10 bill, Australian note, but it was a $10 bill.
Mm-hmm.
I looked it up. That would have been the equivalent of about $150 today. So no small amount to get a $10 bill back in 1960 in Australia.
Right.
Obviously, this was a surprise to the family, but they thought, you know what? Maybe a neighbor knew that we were kind of struggling and they decided to kind of leave us a little gift. And that's the way it was left. Well, a few days later, Pat was dusting the window frame and a $20 bill floated down from the curtains. All right. It's strange, especially because you had the money in the mailbox just a few days earlier, but maybe the previous owner had a $20 bill, decided to kind of hide it in the curtains. Don't know why they would. It's a strange hiding place, but that might have been an explanation for what happened, at least the only rational explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Then one night before going to bed, Pat and Liam walk into the bedroom, and across the top of the bedspread are 5 brand new crisp $10 bills just laying across the bed. So you start adding all this up. This is like $1,200 in today's money that just over a couple of period of days just starts showing up to this family.
Wow.
Okay, but how are they getting in the house and leaving it in the curtains in the bed? That's
Well,
what
that's
I
not
want
the
to know.
question. The question is, how do we get one of those ghosts?
That's
Well, yeah,
right.
that's
Yeah.
I was, I was going to say that, but I didn't want to sound greedy.
Well, it turns out the family felt like, something doesn't seem right with this. And, I guess in the 60s, it would have probably been more of a time to turn towards, depending on what your beliefs were religious wise, that this might be something evil, demonic. You're probably not going to look at it like a guardian angel in the 60s. Everything had a little more of a negative connotation, I think, back then when it came to situations like this. So they couldn't be happy about it. They thought the money's coming from a bad place. They decided to put it in a jar and they placed it in their cupboard. The next day, they look in the cupboard. The jar's still there, but the money's gone.
Ooh.
That's what you
Things
get for
would-
being ungrateful.
Yeah. Things,
Right?
yeah, you either use it or lose it. Things would start to escalate from that point on. The home had an outhouse, as a lot of homes did in the 60s. Pat was out there using the outhouse, doing her business. And I guess it had one of those, not necessarily a handle, but like one of the long sticks that kind of you would pull down to lock the door, keep it from opening on their end. So this could be open and closed from the inside. You couldn't get to it from the outside. As Pat's sitting there, the handle on that door, that stick started lifting up. And it lifted all the way up to the point that the door suddenly opened up. There was nobody outside. It was just Pat sitting there showing everything to the outside world and had no clue how it happened.
Oh, no.
Then on another occasion, Pat walks into her room and she finds all of her clothes that had been in a wardrobe were now strewn all over the bedroom floor. So everything was kind of geared towards Pat for a little bit. Then the entity set its sight on Liam. Somebody apparently stole his cigarettes. There's only 2 of them in the house and the kid. So, he's like, I don't think she did it. So somebody had to do it. Then As he's reading the newspaper, these small pebbles start being thrown at him. I don't know. He don't know where they came from. He just knows these little pebbles started getting thrown at him and smacking him all over the face. So he starts complaining about the cigarettes again. So I guess, getting hit in the head with pebbles makes you think about cigarettes. And the next day, a brand new pack appeared on the kitchen table. Neither one of them had been to the store. Neither one of them had been out of each other's sight.
Oh, he felt bad for taking the cigarettes.
I guess.
Just guilty conscience, I guess.
So the family decides they're going to go out to dinner one night. They arrive back home and they find a stick of incense burning on the windowsill. They didn't use incense. So they had no clue how it got there. And they wouldn't have put it on the windowsill anyway, they said. Now you're getting close to Christmas time. The family puts up their tree. They've got this beautiful decorative ornament they hang on a tree. And suddenly the ornament's missing. Where does it turn up? Outside in their garden on a different
outhouse.
tree.
Oh.
No, not in the outhouse. All right, get this. And I promise this is what was said. A pear went missing and it reappeared on the front seat of their car.
A pear, a fruit pear?
Exactly.
Oh
That
my
wasn't going to
gosh.
be
What
the
kind of
only
random crap.
Well, that wasn't going to be the only havoc that involved food. So one evening, Pat left a steak on a plate. She was getting ready to cook dinner. She walks out of the room. She comes back and the meat was gone. Well, she was frustrated. So she screams at the entity to return the meat. And a few minutes later, it reappeared on the plate. She cuts up the steak. She puts it in a pot. Then she cuts up some vegetables. I guess she's making a pot roast or a stew or something of that nature. She places it on the stove, and almost immediately the pot flew off the stove and crashed on the floor. Now, you could say maybe she just didn't put it on the stove good enough. She says that wasn't the case. It was on the back burner, not the front.
Oh, wow.
But get this. When the pot hit the floor, all the vegetables scattered and went everywhere, but the steak stayed in the pot. It was the only thing left in the pot.
Wow.
This thing's a weirdo.
Well, in a scarier turn of events, there was a kettle of water that was, I guess, basically tipped over and poured on top of their 18-month-old son. Fortunately, he was not injured at all. I don't guess the water might not have been hot yet, or
Oh, no.
it might not even been heating up to begin with, but that happened. At the same moment that the kettle tipped over, there was a plate on the kitchen table that just lifted up and then fell back down and smashed on the table. Here's one of the strangest occurrences. The son was eating, 18 months. He had a piece of meat in his hand, and an unseen force ripped it from his hand, and the meat disappeared.
Well, he could have choked on it. Maybe he was doing a kid a favor.
Maybe so.
It was doing a kid a favor.
The family tried several different ways to drive this entity from their house, but nothing seemed to work. So they moved out. And luckily, the entity didn't follow them. So that's our little story about our Australian poltergeist.
Wow.
I don't know what to think about that. I think he's a weirdo. So it's like, I took your cigarettes because you don't need to smoke. And it's like, why are you giving an 18-month-old meat? They probably don't even have enough cheese to chew it all in yet. So he might choke. So he slapped that away. And all that other, I don't know what the heck. Or maybe they did the incense because they didn't want to smell cigarette smoke anymore. So they thought that would mask the smell. How's that?
I don't know. I would get it more if instead of a steak, it was like chicken or turkey or something, because then maybe it would be a poultrygeist. But
A poultrygeist.
I see what you did there.
Oh my goodness. That is, it just makes you really wonder though, why those things do what they do. Well, how do they choose to do what they do? I mean, is that all they can muster is to knock things off, like on, like on Ghost? How they just, have to really concentrate?
I think in some cases. Tim, what's your take on a poltergeist? What it actually is, in your opinion? Or do you think there's different varieties?
Did you say that they had teenage kids in the house?
No, and that's what I usually associate poltergeist is
Right.
teenagers, especially young ladies, around
Yeah.
that puberty area. That's usually where you get them. But you got the case of the Indiana poltergeist that did involve an elderly woman. And then
Right.
we just covered a story on the last one we did here with Mysterious Circumstances, where it was a 17-year-old boy, but that still fits in the demographics. But this one
Right.
was 2 adults and an 18-month-old baby. So it sounds more, it's listed as a poltergeist story, but to me, it sounds more like a true haunting than a poltergeist.
It sounds more like an extreme haunting, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, and you hate to. It doesn't sound demonic, you know. It sounds more like what Tracy was saying. It sounds more like a
Protective.
protective. Yeah, it almost
Mhm.
sounds like something that's reaching out and trying to be more protective or impish. You know, more
Mhm.
like it's having a little fun with the family. At the same time, it's also,
Mhm.
you know, trying to keep things away from them at the same time and looking out for certain members of the family, like with the cigarettes or like with the meat, keeping it away from the baby but at the same time, you know, it's messing with the mom with the pot. Um, it, it's, it's almost like it's trying to keep it, like it succeeded in keeping them away from the house or getting them away
Mhm.
from the house. But you know, it's kind of interesting. You can't really, you know, sit down and have a conversation with it unless you do some sort of work with it, ITC work with it. But you know, that family had no idea of knowing that they could do that.
Mhm. Well, my whole thing too is with the money. What I mean,
That,
Well,
yeah,
I don't
that's
think I've ever.
the
Go
money,
ahead, sorry.
you know, the money I think is almost more explainable than anything else. I think the
Mhm.
money is the way to entice it to see if is the spirit's way of enticing them to see if they'll play along. In other words,
Hmm.
I'm offering you a gift. If you take the gift in good faith, you know what? I think I changed my mind. I think it may, you're going to roll your eyes when I say this. It may be a bit of a demonic spirit because you take the money in good, I shouldn't say in good faith. You take the money, you use it, then you've entered into a contract.
yeah, you're obligated now.
You're obligated, right? They
Mhm.
took the money, put it in a jar. So in other words, they didn't trust the entity. The minute they don't trust the entity and they don't enter the contract, that's when the games begin,
Oh,
right?
there you go. Uh-huh.
So that's when the entity starts to turn against them. If they take the money and they selfishly use it, well, they've entered the contract, then the entity would then start to reward them and then play the Faustian game and then eventually turn against them. And, you know, and then eventually maybe show themselves to the family. But that didn't
Hmm.
happen. You see what
Yeah.
I'm saying? So it
Yeah.
might have been a demonic spirit,
But
but we don't know.
the money though could have been, and just a more proof of what Tracy was saying, of they might have been trying to help the family out. Maybe the entity was like, look, here's some money. Things are tough right now. Let's help you get through. We're gonna make you quit smoking. We're gonna, we're not gonna mix our meat and veggies together because food shouldn't touch. I don't know, but
True, true.
whatever the case is, and maybe that was a reason for taking the meat out. Maybe that meat was tainted,
It could have
and
been.
they were,
Yeah.
so maybe all of it were signs that it was just trying to help out. Who
Yeah.
knows?
It could have been. You're right. It could have been the spirit had all intentions, but to move stuff that quickly and that violently, most
Mhm.
regular spirits don't have that kind of power,
That's true.
you know? I mean, to make that kind of money materialize that quickly, most regular spirits I don't think can do that. I mean, there's such a thing as pennies from heaven, but that kind of money,
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's Fort Knox stuff, you know?
Yeah. But where'd they get the money? Is my question. I mean, how do you just come up with money? I guess.
Well, I
I mean,
mean,
how you?
it's not the first time that money's materialized. I mean, the past week in my house, I've had pennies showing up everywhere. So someone's putting pennies from somewhere, somehow. We
Well,
have change
Wow.
shares here, but
not
I'm finding it out on the sidewalk, like just random pennies.
not to beat a dead horse, but I am welcome to that spirit spending some time at this house. We'll try to.
I'll send them over.
And I don't cook, so we don't have to worry about any dishes getting broke. So
But you don't cook.
that's what I said. I don't cook.
Oh, I was
well,
trying
you
to
do,
say.
so
Yeah, Tracy
You
said
do, but-
Tracy set a new record by setting the neighbor's smoke alarm off. So we don't let her cook much anymore.
oh yeah.
Tim, it's been an absolute blast, man. This was fun.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I had a great time as well.
He is Tim Dennis from Darkness Radio. Go listen. We're Tracy and Jerry from Hillbilly Horror Stories. You can find both of our podcasts anywhere you listen to podcasts. Tim, you got a YouTube page?
I do, yes. The original Darkness Radio is the way you look it up. That's one way of finding it. You can also connect to it by going to darknessradioshow.com. There's a page
Nice.
there that connects to the YouTube page.
All right. And you can
Very
find all
cool.
our social media under Hillbilly Horror Stories. Just Google it. It's easy to find these days. So, all right. Tim, thanks for coming on, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you both.
Bye, Tim. Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right, folks, for the second part of our program, I want to thank Jerry Paulley and I want to thank Tracy for exchanging haunted stories there. The first part of the program. Second part of our program, I got an interesting kind of post from a friend of mine, Razorhawk, who said to me, "You've got to talk to a friend of mine by the name of Ed Casas, who has an interesting story to tell you about his theory on a group of aliens." Now, normally I say to myself, oh, okay. And he says it would make a great segment for your show. Well, being as today Nancy Timms is out and she's got obligations, and that guest went by the wayside today, I said, you know what? Today we're going to roll the dice. We're going to take a chance. And I don't know why I'm taking a chance, but today of all days I'm taking a chance. And I trust Razor. That's the way it goes. I trust Razor. So I wanted to have Ed Casas on because this is actually a topic that we've covered on Supernatural News, and we've talked about Nazca mummies before, but this ties into Nazca mummies quite a bit. So I want to introduce into Darkness Radio right now, Ed Casas. Ed, thank you so much for being on the program. Now, this is much bigger though than the Nazca mummies. This is something called the Tridactyls and the Tridactyls theory. Now, let's get into the slow
Actually,
build, right?
the theory is the constant companion theory.
Okay. Please explain, because I'm intrigued. The minute we started to talk about this online and then brought it here onto Zoom, I started to the head started to expand, and I went, okay, very, very interesting. I'm very intrigued. Now, to be fair, there was a bit of and there still is a bit of a controversy about the Nazca mummies, but I keep an open mind about it. The fact of the matter is that there were DNA tests on the Nazca mummies, and it came back that these were not of this earth. DNA is not conclusive that these things are anything that we know of.
Yeah,
Which is interesting. Very interesting.
it is.
My co-host on the show called them cake, which a lot of people did.
Yeah,
Because they look weird. Let's face
they
it.
looked weird.
Yeah. I want you to pick it up from here because, again, you're a very eloquent man. You have an archaeology background. I want you to explain to people what your background is and where your interest is in this and how you've picked it up and formed your own theory here.
Yeah, great, man. Thanks for having me. Yeah, a little bit about myself is I'm a sometimes actor, and I've been a sometimes archaeologist. I didn't know if I wanted to be Harrison Ford or Indiana Jones, so I've tried to do a little bit of both. I didn't want to major in theater, and so I decided to major in something I liked, which was anthropology. And I ended up doing great. I was the president of the honors club. I got a dual degree in social sciences with a certificate in ethnic studies. And, my parents are like, what are you going to do with that degree? And I said, I don't know, work at a museum. And I did. And I ended up working at a museum, running the education department, doing the activities, running some paleontological runs for scouts down rivers looking for fossils in Florida. And so it's been a fun thing. The museum did close, but I did try to continue doing things, to do some archaeology, taught history at a private high school, and I had a nice experience tutoring the Seminole children on the reservation. So that's sort of my background. But the Nazca mummies, I too thought were cake, and when it came across my Google feed, I dismissed them.
Yeah.
My girlfriend was like, you might want to take a better look at these because they're still talking about them.
So let me stop.
And I know,
So
yeah.
Ed, so you look at them and you too think cake. So automatically the skeptic in you, the scientist in you says, well, I don't know that I can quite believe it. So
Right.
when your girlfriend says, we'll take a closer look at it, what is it that engages in you that says, okay, well, I guess I'll keep an open mind and I'll look at it?
You know, you can only see so much by looking at those bodies, which is why many people have implored people to come investigate them firsthand themselves, which I was hoping to do. I tried putting a team together. Fortunately, my team isn't that interested. But very simply, the testimony of experts. And, you know, I know we live in an age where we don't believe people, but, you know, if we just live our whole lives totally out of trust and thinking everything is a conspiracy. I mean, well, how do you live like that? It'll be debilitating. So there were several gentlemen who came forth who seemed to be pushing this, that this was a real thing. There was a Russian doctor, a paleontologist who wrote a report, a very detailed report. He's a paleontologist. This is what they do. They look at bone structure, right? But really, the guy who really sold me was Dr. Zalce Benitez, who was the lead forensics officer for the Mexican Navy. And it's like, if this guy doesn't know what a body is, who knows what a body is?
Yeah.
Because even myself, even though I say, I'm an anthropologist, I've done archaeology, most of my stuff is cultural and educational. You know, I even said, I can't just go there and investigate the bodies myself, because what am I going to do? I'm not an expert myself. But what did happen was something clicked in my brain, and I remembered seeing the beings. I recognized them. And I don't know how many people on the planet actually recognize them, but something in my head went, oh, I know who those are. I've seen them before. I've seen their faces on petroglyphs in Canada and petroglyphs as far and wide as the Caribbean.
Hmm.
And what I noticed specifically wasn't their tridactyl limbs. That actually didn't even jar my head. It was their cordiform or heart-shaped faces that's created because they have these very pronounced supraorbital arches, very large brow ridges.
Okay.
And so I actually have a resin cast of a 3D printed head that's supposed to be close to, I never know, close to actual size. So I could show that to you.
Please do. Yeah.
Okay. So this is an actual head of Josephina.
Yeah.
Although I like to call her Mama Kila because Clifford Mills, the paleontologist, said he found cat wounds on her. And the moon goddess, Mama Kila, is supposed to be attacked by a jaguar whenever there is a lunar eclipse. And so I thought maybe that's really her name. Now, I thought skulls were pretty unusual at first, but they're kind of similar to something called Homo longi, which is coincidentally Dragon Man. So keep that dragon in mind. It might come up again later in conversation. Okay. So, but again, this was the main part that drew me to them, was this cordiform shaped head, this heart shaped head. And so this led me on a journey of symbolism, where one symbolism was found in association with another symbol, which may have led me to either another symbolism or the ancestral narrative. So everything I try to tell you today, if I say anything that I think is speculative, I will say it's speculative. But mostly my job is to say, hey, look, I found this in the archaeological record. Hey, look, I heard this cultural narrative from a certain people. And, we last year, if you had told me anything about reptilians and Anunnaki and the Bible, I would have threw a rock at you, because To me, that is all just absolute, just garbage, nonsense. It is just mental poop.
Okay.
Well, guess what? A year later, and now I'm mixing all of this in some strange Kool-Aid drink that I'm drinking myself that seems to be putting all of these narratives of the world together.
Huh. All right.
So it's been quite the journey. And so the lead part of my theory was I realized that this heart-shaped face was found in association with mother goddess imagery. And this mother goddess imagery was also found in association with what I believe are water spirals. Could be serpents, could be water serpents. And yes, even serpents and snakes were found in association. And this is probably typical of like American West petroglyphs too. You can probably find everything I just said in a variety of places. So keep that in mind though. Found in association with a mother goddess. So the mother goddess is a tridactyl being giving birth in these depictions. Even the Maori and their groovy little heitiki, a little jade green stone being, is a heart-shaped being with like a weird bend to it. Little hands, looks like three-fingered hands.
Mm-hmm.
And they call that an ancestral being. So that's another thing that happened to me. There was sort of this sort of existential spiritual enlightenment that occurred during this. So there is the woo, as people say. So I have experienced the woo as well, because it makes you wonder, why did these people consider this an ancestor? Kind of out of frame.
There you go. Yeah.
Why did they think that? And you know, it's funny, we call this the heart shape, and we have the heart shape emoji, and that never made sense to me as a kid. Like, why does it call it the heart? It doesn't really look like a heart to me. But you know, it does kind of look like a heart to me.
Oh,
This does.
when you turn, when you turn the head on its,
When you turn the head on its side.
completely.
So
Yeah. You know what's
other things you might want to look for on these real quick is the these temporal bones.
Yep.
Are usually very triangular, and you can see those a lot. Of course, occipital bump here is also of importance. You might see that, and I say that a lot, and I mean in other like artifacts.
You know what's also interesting, Ed, when you think back to ancient Egypt, when they went to bind the skulls, it looks like they're almost trying to mimic the way that skull is sitting there.
Bingo, Tim. We've all known these things for a long time, right? We've all either had these instinctually, and we've seen it on the ancient alien shows, and plenty of them have been poo-pooed because people said, well, those aren't aliens, those are just people, because they just had their head bound. But there's a reason for everything, and that's what anthropology does. Anthropology tries to demonstrate that there is an impetus for everything we have and do in our culture. What's funny, though, there is something in anthropology that is they ascribe to a galactic coincidence, and they call it independent innovation. That means when traditional anthropologists see something invented in one part of the world and something invented in another part of the world, they call it independent innovation, dismissing everything we know about anthropology, which is cultural transference, is what normally happens.
Yeah.
And that's kind of part of what my theory is here. My theory is like all these things of independent innovation are not true. We have the so-called missing link, and I don't mean genetically, although let's find out with that. But I mean the cultural missing link is what the tridactyls are. They fill in all the blanks of many ancestral narratives, mythologies, cosmologies, and belief systems. But real quick, the mother goddess and the ancestral worship and the heart-shaped face made me say, oh my God, these beings inspired something as basic as our heart symbol.
Yeah.
That was the start of my theory. And again, it also sort of puts the ontological weight on you there. What? And so keep in mind, that was a year ago, sir. I have been researching these beings now full-time, every day, waking up with the same gusto and energy I'm telling this story to you right now.
Mm-hmm.
And each day or so, or every other day, I've come across a new discovery.
Interesting.
So it's been wild.
It sounds wild. The other thing I was thinking too is I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the model of the head that you have there. When you look straight on at the face, I can't help but think, there's this conspiracy theory out there, at least that's what they're calling it, Ed, is that, Steven Spielberg was getting his secrets directly from the government when he was going to make his movies. I keep looking into that face and seeing E.T. I don't know if you do when you look into that face.
He worked directly with the Project Blue Book guy. So this kind of outs him, if you ask me. This outs him on E.T. And remember Close Encounters? Everybody was blown away by Close Encounters before E.T.
Yeah.
Like everybody was like, wow, those seem real. Shit, we might want to go back and see if they were. You never know. Because yeah, he had inside information from the Blue Book people. So they did have the bodies, obviously, as Grush has said, right? You've heard that there's been a gentleman who's testified to our own Congress about having bodies. That's why it's strange people aren't really accepting this story when a man just testified that the U.S. has bodies, and then Mexico is like, yeah, here they are.
Yeah.
Check them out. So yes, the first thing people say is, oh, it looks like E.T. And really what you should be saying is, you mean E.T. looks like them?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. When you first held that up, I went, well, that's E.T.
Yes.
I want to shout it out
And
loud.
you know what? Now that I'm glad you're that far along, because that's going to help you when searching for these in artifacts, because those arches in their heads seems to be a focal point. So yeah, the heart was part of the thing that really that set me on a journey. And then so imagine this, it's almost like I have this imaginary sort of, the Raiders of the Lost Ark animation where they're flying across the globe, dun, 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 and that's what I got going on. So if you will come with me from Peru, dun, 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 and we go to Canada and the Caribbean where we find these things, and then from there we veer off to New Zealand where we find the ancestral beings. From there, I go across the waters to Syria, where I find the Syrian eye idols, who look like little E.T. gingerbread cookies. So you start seeing these things, and you start realizing, oh my God, these things were everywhere. We have them documented. We've all seen them, and we've probably dismissed them. I mean, this is my topic, right? And I'm still just floored that, like, oh, I didn't notice that. Growing up, Yeah.
So these beings that you're talking about aren't typical grays. These aren't typical grays that I'm looking at least the model that you're showing me.
Well, okay, to be fair, maybe these aren't, but there are the hybrid children. Mm-hmm. So there are multiple specimens, I myself, I got scared I was going to get blacklisted for a second. I myself, I found a tridactyl fetus using the CT scans provided by the alien-project.com. That's if you haven't been there yet, that's where you want to do. Those are the guys, and we should probably get one of them on your show, to be honest. Those are the guys that are working on the physical aspects of the bodies, and they have all the CT scans for you, and you can go in, and you can tool around and look underneath them and up around and all that stuff. And I was in there, and I had noticed there is an artifact, so we can go to Japan now. Dun, 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 and there's these things called pig dragons, and they're these little jade stones. I probably have one in. I could probably get one if you want, if we could take a break here in a sec.
Sure.
I don't know. Do you do that or no?
Yeah, we can take a small break and you can grab
it.
So
I can bring a pig dragon to show you. So these pig dragons appear to be Japanese depictions of like a fetus stage of the beings. Once again, I recognize their faces, right? We're focusing on the eyes and on the supraorbital arches. So I went looking around and I was like, oh, that egg looks like it's hatching. And I kind of just followed it around, and in another egg, I found another skull of what appeared to be and of course, this is still while people are like, these aren't real. These are llama heads. And I'm like so far past that. Like, I can't even I try not even to deal with skeptics anymore. They're really just a waste of time, because when you could be doing research, like legit research. And so I made a little video and I sent it to the lead researchers, and he posted it on his page with the word unbelievable. Now, this is their footage. This is their footage. And here I am saying, but there's been this weird, even like with the Twitter community, X community, they didn't seem that impressed. And so I'm so glad to be talking to you, because it feels like I am just yelling in a void sometimes. And it's just like, I don't know what's going on. It's bizarro world sometimes. Like, hey, look at this. It's cool. And everyone's like, yeah, whatever.
Well, here's what's intriguing, Ed, and this is where I'm trying. You know, we talk about the universe in itself, and I guess where these beings fit in the, I don't want to call it a rogues gallery, but where they fit in the, I guess in the spectrum of aliens, right? Or where they fit in the day-to-day of.
Well, the thing is, there's a variety of them. In fact, I'm kind of jumping ahead here in my theory, but you know, I have my own nomenclature for them that I would like to see used. I'm sure it won't be used. Someone else will end up naming them. But I believe these are the Naga beings of Southeast Asia.
Okay.
And I have found evidence to support that. But the Naga beings may have been the impetus for the Indian caste system, because the Naga beings had a sort of hierarchy themselves. There was the serpentine Nagas, who were like the wise ones. And then there was the metallurgist, skillcraft Yaksha dwarves, which I thought the Tridactyls, my hypothesis were the Yakshas were metaphorical stand-ins for the Tridactyls. I later found evidence to prove that, and we could talk about that if we have a chance. And then not lastly, then there are the Rakshasa. Are you familiar with them? Rakshasa? Oh. These are like ogre type beings.
Okay.
And so the Tridactyls, there have been large heads and 7-inch hands found.
Really?
And I don't know if you know about the hands, but the Tridactyl hands have an extra phalange. The 7-inch hands have an extra phalange and have 6 on each finger.
Wow.
So those might be, these Rakshasa might be your reptilians. And then lastly is the Shudra, which is the worker class. And Maria, the hybrid, looks like she may have had a hard life, judging by some of the wear and tear on her body. So she may have been, the hybrids may have been and we were just the untouchables. But you know the myths, you know the Bible, you know what they say happened. The higher echelon beings got freaky with the locals.
That's the story.
And so, you know, the genetic, which people can go to the nationalhealthinstitute.org and they can look up we have the links. You can look up the DNA of, I believe it's Victoria and Maria. I think Victoria's, the little headless one, probably Victoria's probably Victor, but it probably doesn't matter, because I put out a hypothesis, a guess, and a lot of my guesses are based on myth, but they're becoming fortified by science. So I had put forth the idea that these beings were hermaphrodite and experienced parthenogenesis. That is, they can self-replicate. Where did I get that from? From all the myths of like gods saying that they thought themselves in the being, or thought themselves pregnant, and man from the mind of God, and all these sort of things. And sure enough, they're doing some biological tests on Maria, and she definitely has the chromosomes of both. So it's interesting how useful the myths have been in predicting biology. You know, I think these beings have a marine origin. They might go through a metamorphosis. One of the scientists found evidence of oceanic minerals in the skull, which would indicate marine beginnings.
Okay.
So yeah, I was hoping to see the whole fetus in the egg, because I have a prediction that its lower limbs aren't fully developed. And I tell you what, if we see the fetus and the lower limbs aren't fully developed on the ones in the eggs, not the ones in the hybrids, because those are very human-like, then I'm just gonna say, like, I told you so, sort of thing, because I think again you can see these beings in the archaeological record. Wow, I've said a lot.
No, but see, even that's fascinating. I mean, the fact that they hatch from it. Okay, so okay, that's overwhelming. How do they give birth? So you're saying they hatch from an egg?
I'm not sure how they give birth. Again, there's eggs within. I guess you would call that what is this?
Because
I'm losing the term, but they're born alive. It's avi ovum oviparity or something like that. I'm losing the word, but So it is a possibility that they born alive and they have some sort of gastro brooding or mouth brooding where they might even transfer the beings from each other's mouths, possibly. And again, that's based a little bit on mythology. So there's speculation. So that when I'm doing things like that, I don't have the science on that, right? So I'm speculating, but I'm speculating not out of the ether. I'm basing it on strange myths and depictions of things coming out of people's mouths and going into people's mouths, and the myths of man from the mouth of serpent, or just these general motifs that are nearly universal.
Okay. Because one of the stories that we had read here on the show, one of the mummies, I believe, had eggs in the womb. Wasn't that correct?
Yes. So Artemis and Josephina, at least, I don't know how many others, have at least 3 or 4 eggs in them.
Yeah. And that, I found that curious because after all this time, I mean, you would think, I don't know how well preservation is with these different mummies and whatnot, but the fact that some sort of a fetus or an egg, wouldn't it deteriorate? Wouldn't you think that would be one of the first things that would?
That's interesting because it is on the interior, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, what is that about? I don't know. Is that something to do with like a reptilian type egg, perhaps being able to? Yeah, I don't know how to answer that one either. That's probably a good question for the biologist. Why would it still be there, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that to me, that's incredibly fascinating. I would think that much like body parts or anything else that would disintegrate interior, inside or in the interior, you would think a fetus or an egg or something like that would be one of those internal things that would disintegrate.
Yeah, unless, I don't know, they did something we don't know about, right? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Good stuff, though.
Yeah, and that was one of those things that, and pardon me for throwing this out there, that's one of the things that got skeptics going, because they thought, well, why would an egg survive all that time? They thought,
Right.
Yeah.
But you know what I find that I think we're having this sort of logic issue. I find that we're having, it's like, well, we can think that, well, an egg wouldn't survive, so therefore, if an egg wouldn't survive, this is not an egg. And I think that's kind of what we're doing lately. But really, it's like, well, these eggs survived, and here they are, so we have to now think forward in that direction rather than thinking, well, normally it wouldn't survive. You know what I'm saying?
I'm not saying I'm not saying it's not possible, because we know of deaths, human deaths, where a woman will die with a fetus inside of her, and the fetus will calcify and stay inside the womb. And
yeah, absolutely. It could be something like that, or it could be, I don't know. I have no idea. Preservation, or, I'm reminded of the myths of Medusa and people being turned into pillars of salt. And you wonder sometimes too, if that has anything to do with these. Is there some other technology we're just not aware of? Because after all, these beings have high tech, I don't want to say high tech, but they have metal implants. You're familiar with those too, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, yeah. It's a fascinating deal. So let me ask you this, Ed. So are these truly beings from the stars, or are these, I hate to use the word demon or fallen angel? Are we looking at a different type of being other than something from up there?
Well, I would like to say that first off, I'm finding evidence of their tenure being here for tens of thousands of years.
Okay.
So at what point does someone become a citizen? How long does someone have to live somewhere to become a citizen? And so, well, their DNA, a lot of it is completely different than anything on planet Earth, but yet there is some, but is that from a hybridization process, perhaps? I don't know if we've done the DNA on the so-called insectoids, which is a terrible misnomer of a name. I guess they have some sort of hard cartilage on their lower abdomen that's lending to that, and they also have spinal appendages coming off their back that we're still not sure what exactly those are. Of course, people are calling them wings, but they don't appear to be any sort of wing I'm familiar with as far as something that could actually fly. Did I answer your question? I feel like I went around.
No. You've. I think you got there. Yeah, I think you got there.
I wasn't sure. I may have lost a track there.
Okay, so earlier in the segment, you had talked about having this pig dragon, I believe you called it, and you have an example of it. Explain to us once again, what this is.
Sure. So there's several, I would call them, I guess, anomalous artifacts out in the world. One of them is called a magatama, which are little stone cashew-like shaped things. And to me, they look like some sort of a larva or something. Okay. But people aren't really sure what they are. They're just this off, weird thing. And another one is the Chinese pig dragons. Of course, now China's interesting because China, like a lot of places, the beings who taught them everything, agriculture, language, sciences, writing, math, were dragons. People like Nua were depicted as half serpent. Mm-hmm. Beings like the Emperor Yu, who was born from an egg, and born from an egg talking. So you can see right there, as we go on our journey across the world and we get to China, now we start to see myths that are corresponding to the biology of what we're finding. Isn't that strange?
Very
so
strange.
The pig dragons. Yeah. So they have these things called pig dragons, and I say, those look like they could be baby tridactyls. Now, mind you, I don't know if these artifacts are authentic. One's got a nice weight to them. These could be being made in some guy's, basement with a Dremel drill. But I still think they're cool. And no matter what, I figured they're still a legit artifact because somebody took the time to make it. Whether these are ancient artifacts or not, I don't know. I doubt it. But hey, it's fun to have, right?
Right.
So I want to put that out there. I'm not here to trick anybody into thinking that this is the Ark of the Covenant or anything.
Right. Right. Interesting. Huh.
So here's one.
Okay.
So armed with the knowledge of these, I went scanning through those CT scans.
Okay. And
sure enough, I found a couple. So to me, look at that view right there, those eyes. You see those eyes? Those eyes itself are practically a motif. They're practically a style.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Yep.
So this said to me, holy shit, the ancients knew what the babies look like.
Yeah. Okay. So, I get it. So like a model of what the fetus might look like of these.
So I like to brag that not only I might be one of the first people to publicly announce a tridactyl fetus on the planet Earth, but I might be one of the first people to publicly announce a dragon fetus in thousands of years.
Okay, yeah.
So,
yeah. No, I see what you mean.
And of course, the dragons and the Naga are the same people. In fact, I was at an Indonesian restaurant the other day, and I was like, "So, what do you know about the dragon or the Naga?" She said, "Oh, they're the same. Dragon and Naga, same." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. They're the same."
Okay. Now, this may seem kind of redundant, Ed, to ask, but do you hear many reports of people saying, "I've had a direct experience with a Naga," even modern day, or someone saying,
Yes, and yes, with the Naga, I have, and unfortunately, after meeting, after seeing the Nazca mummies and doing my research, when I hear some of these people say that, it does sound like quite a bunch of bullshit. It does. It sounds like a bunch of malarkey. That they went to like the Naga plane and everything. They talk about Nagaloka, the Naga, Nagaloka could be either like Sri Lanka,
okay,
Peru, or like Antarctica or something. So when they talk about the different levels of Earth, it doesn't necessarily have to be altitude. You could literally be going through the latitudes, because that's kind of how they describe some of the early gods splitting up the planet. You would have these latitudes, I get these latitudes down here. So, and also when people talk about like the underworld, because you did say demons, underworld could be underground, just plain old, just underground. Or again, it could be south, it could be south of here, or it could be the water. So it doesn't have to be this nefarious hellscape. One hopes.
I was going to say, do you think these, that was actually where my mind was wandering. Do you think these creatures live underground or live in caves or?
Yes. Yes. They again, marine existence and a subterranean underwater existence. It's probably why our temples are built many times over waterways. Many of the entrances to the underworld have a mouth, like a creature or a mouth or the body. I noticed that you're either going into like the Witz monster in Mesoamerica, where you're entering the mouth to go underground, or an actual the body. And it might have multiple meanings. You come from us, you go to you. I don't know, something like that. You're born from us. You come back to the earth when you die. There's some symbolism there. This whole thing is definitely ripe with symbolism amongst it all. And you said demons before. Now, of course, the demons is basic. Really, I would say maybe one specific religion's sort of take on some negative entities.
Sure.
And so, throughout history, we've heard tales of asuras versus the devas. We've heard of the Asir versus the Vanir, devils and angels, of course, right? So maybe there are some factions going on here. And, there are some, which could be either sexual dimorphisms, that is differences between the sexes, or differences in some subspecies. But, one of the headless ones, coincidentally, which is also the seated one, is headless. One of the only ones that's in the seated position. I think that's important, because there are a lot of deities depicted in the seated position. There's the seated God, and who knows if that's one of the first. So, but he has pronounced cranial ridges on the lateral sides here.
Okay.
They almost look like feathers when you look at them. So I don't know if this is where the plumed serpent comes from, but this is likely where your myths and tales of horned beings come from. It's from these cranial ridges. So your satyrs, things like Capricorn. So there's a funny story about Capricorn and Pan. Pan was cursed, and he jumped into the Mediterranean. He became a half fish, right? Capricorn, half fish, half goat, right? Well, the island of Capri, I want you to look at it again sometime. The island of Capri is kind of fish-shaped. It's kind of like a fish head-shaped. Take a look at that sometime. So there's also, throughout these journeys, some strange geological coincidences, like Easter Island. Easter Island is a, Hammerhead from Star Wars.
Yeah.
Easter Island is a wide-headed island with two circular points at either wide end. And one of the names for it is the god with the eyes that look up. So they're saying this wide-headed, triangular head, again, is a god, just like they said the Heitiki was an ancestral being, ancestral worship.
Okay.
So pig dragons allowed us to hopefully find that tridactyl fetus. So that was exciting. And we can continue around the world too. There's these really fun Permian bronze artifacts. And these are like cut tin, hammered tin metal in Permian Russia from, I want to say, maybe 2nd century or 5th century up to the 12th century. And these little bronze copper, I'm trying to think the proper name for them. I'm going to say they're plates, bronze castings, depict little families, tridactyl beings, wide-headed tridactyl beings. And that also said to me, just looking at what I call the countenance, I use a term called countenance, which is their general demeanor of their face. I feel like throughout the artifacts, that's something I can also see is a general countenance. And the countenance of the Permian bronze beings is very benign, maybe even scared at times. It almost looks like there's these groups of three, which is interesting because theory has a group of three. Coincidentally, he probably doesn't even know about these Permian things, but theory from the Alien Project has the family. And in the Permian things, they actually call them the Holy Family is the name of the artifacts in the Russian term. And it's these little groups of three beings. Sometimes they look happy looking at you, but it feels like you just open a pantry door with a flashlight, and you saw the three of them there. That's the feeling I get from them. So look those up sometime.
Yeah.
Permian bronze culture, a Permian bronze animal style. I probably have them on my page somewhere.
Okay.
So yeah, just another artifact.
Yeah, very interesting. Ed, let me as we start to kind of wrap up here, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Why is it now mind you, you have the education to start to put this together, and you recognize these beings, and you started to kind of, I don't want to say go down the rabbit hole with this and figure it out.
Well, yeah.
But why is it that other people of educated means didn't say, well, I think we've seen these beings before.
Okay.
Why couldn't we put it all together?
Because we really haven't seen these beings before.
Okay.
That's just it. So I'm so glad you asked that. And it's going to bring me to another place. So I had a hypothesis that I kept hearing tales of the yakshas in India. They're just the dwarves. You know your dwarves from mythology. You know what they do, right? They were fulfilling that role. They were dwarves. I'm like, oh, those are the little guys. That's probably why the little guys have metal on them, right? And we have bigger guys and whatnot. So I'm watching Praveen Mahan. He's this Indian gentleman who goes to different temples, and I'm watching his video, and he's scanning a god statue. And many times the god is flanked by two guardian gods, two little beings. So there's a taller being, like a taller, attractive one, and two little weird ones many times on the side.
Okay.
Those two beings you probably will see today, even still, as your foo dogs and your Chinese lions and your guardian lions you see outside the library. That same concept evolved through human culture, and we have those there. So during his video, I'm watching it, and this is one of the first times I noticed this motif. There, like I'm sitting like this, because it's a common motif. I noticed that the Yaksha beings were concealing a hyper-realistic looking head of a biological tridactyl. And this was one of the earliest forms of steganography that I came across. So this is probably important. I'm glad we didn't end too soon. A huge part of my theory is based on steganography, which is the art of concealing information within art.
Okay.
And so things like our heart, or the next symbol that I moved on to, the ionic columns. The ionic columns are stylized versions of the being's eyes. And they come to us via goddess temples that were also related to serpents and healing. So Hera and Asclepicles. Wow, where was I at?
Healing eyes.
Oh my goodness. I went off on some, I got too sidetracked by the ionic columns. Symbolism. I'm not sure now. Anyway, oh wow, that was good. Okay. So sorry about that.
That's okay.
I don't know what I was on about. It was something about the dwarves and the steganography. Okay, thank you. Back to the steganography. Oh, I brought myself back. So the ionic columns, if you had an ionic column out, you would say something, not everyone may know that, oh, this is the healing temple, let's say. So what I have found is that there is this complex concealment of various things throughout architecture and art. And one of the techniques they use is something called perspective anamorphosis. And perspective anamorphosis at Bayon Temple, it requires two things. It requires distance and an angle. Okay.
Okay.
At Bayon Temple, if you stand at the proper distance and a proper angle, faces will start to come out of the temple. You'll start to be able to put these two disparate images together in your mind. But here's the other thing about perspective anamorphosis. This is where you asked me. You said, how come people don't, how, and this, someone asked me this recently, how come researchers don't know this, Ed? Okay, because part of perspective anamorphosis is you have to know the beings. If you don't know them, and I'll go as far to say, not even know them, but believe in them, and I'll even go one step further and say, I think you may even need some empathy for them.
Okay.
You may not see this because that is the missing information, which is why, my friend, that thousands of people are attending World Heritage sites today on tourism benders, which some of these conceal hyper-realistic depictions of non-human beings. And this includes such sites as the Temple of Hathor in Dendera. This includes ancient Buddhist artifacts that are concealed with a motif. I had to come up with this motif. I had to call it the brilliance motif. So there's probably some on my page right now. Cave paintings are the same way. And what I mean by the brilliance motif is you have to squint for the optical illusion to take effect. Have you ever seen anything like this in a comic book or something as a kid?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Where you have to kind of, you have to, if you take and squint your eyes,
that's a perspective anamorphosis because it's dependent on your perspective to see the image.
Yeah.
So I discovered, and things started clicking. Again, it's probably because I recognize them. So for whatever reason, I'm ahead of the curve in the class as far as that goes. Things started clicking. And you might find yourself doing the same thing. And these artifacts start to come to life, if you will. Not literally.
Right. But
yeah, I didn't have any experiences, but as a kid, the Hudson River Valley craft, are you familiar with that?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, the Hudson River Valley craft flew right overhead and hit me with its spotlight back in the 80s.
Oh, wow.
In fact, we were probably one of the first kids to see it because we were in Western Massachusetts, and it's like just at the point where like sightings started.
Oh, geez.
We were playing hide and go seek in the woods, and we used to play kill the guy hide and go seek in the woods. So you'd be like tackling people into oak trees, go, you know. Yeah. And we were playing, and all of a sudden, a low hum. The forest is lit up bright white. You can see yourself. You were hiding 3 seconds before that. And I look up, and there's the classic triangular point, the big red beam, the white light. But here's the thing. It sounds super cool as I tell it now. Do you know what we said when we were kids? We said, weird plane. We said, weird plane.
I see. I would have been a little bit more of a fraidy cat. I think I would have crapped myself and ran. I was.
Well, you know what? There was a little bit of the distance of these giant spruce pine trees between me and the thing. So here's what kicks my ass every time. If I had just left the forest, there's a huge field before I had to cross the mountains to New York State, and I would have seen like. I would have seen everything. Yeah. And so I'm a little disappointed by that. But now I get to live this whole Tridactyl thing. And again, I'm making discoveries in World Heritage sites. I believe these beings can be seen in the languages of the world. And I mean the letters of the world. The ancient Chinese symbol for sky and God is a little dwarf. A little dwarf being.
Interesting. Very interesting indeed.
The primary letter in one of the Sanskrit languages is Ka, and it looks like a snake man. It's got like a little crowned head. Oh, crowned heads. Another letter, Chinese, Rua, the North Sea god. There's pictures of him with 3 horns and his 3 hands and like one serpentine body. But we don't talk about any of this stuff, do we?
No.
I've been able to spend the whole year focusing on this like no one else can, because you also have to have a little bit of accent. I have to be a little bit eccentric. And so I'm eccentric enough, and I'm eccentric enough to put up with the people who are going to be like, no, that's true. You're crazy, blah, blah, blah. You know, I had to pull rank on somebody today. He came in, he's like, your pareidolia isn't good for the community. It's like, pareidolia, he says to me. You know what pareidolia is, right?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And I was just like, yeah, how many museums did you work at? Have you ever done archaeology? You ever taught history? You know, and I hate to be that guy, because I think everybody's opinion should matter, but it should matter enough that don't come to me saying that my stuff's pareidolia. what I've been trying to demonstrate is that this architecture is in the stonework of the Americas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So these supraorbital arches of the beings can be found in our country. Where do you live, by the way?
I'm in Minnesota. I'm up.
Oh, you're with Jack up there. Okay.
Yeah. I'm up
okay.
here
Cool.
with Jack. So yeah, we're
Okay. So
we're a stone's throw.
I've been talking your ear off.
That's okay. Okay. So last question here, Ed, and that's this. So if you were to get an invite, oh wow, there you go. If you were to get an invite, if you're watching the video here, you can see the figure.
Oh. Got a little 3D dude.
Little 3D.
They got furculas, you know.
They do.
They got furcula, little wishbones.
So
yeah,
I'm gonna play a little what if with you here, Ed, to close out our segment. You get an invite. Let's say you get an invite to go down and actually see these things for yourself.
Well, I did. I could have went. And I didn't go.
Why didn't you go?
I didn't feel like I had the biological experience and know how to do anything. I would go down and take a selfie with them. Like, hey. I tried to get my once friend, Bobby DePalma, who is a world famous paleontologist. He discovered the CT, we believe he's found the CT Cretaceous Tertiary extinction line. He was featured on Attenborough's BBC. So I tried to get him to go. And he's like, oh, Ed, yeah, I'm all for human beings being a cargo cult. You familiar with that term?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, but I don't believe this. And then I have another guy who has a master's in archaeology, anthropology, and he's taken himself down the Nile River and the Amazon River, right? And I tried to get him to go. Nope. Another woman, master's in archaeology. She's done work on the Bimini Road as a scuba person. She wasn't going to go. So, oh, wait, one more. A doctor in physical anthropology was like, nope. So it's been very weird because those are like, those were my Avengers,
What's with the lack of, I don't want to say lack of interest, but what's with the lack of fortitude to want to go?
Again, everybody's skeptical, and then it's coming from me. They're just like, this is too far out there. I always hope that when you think you have more credibility than you do. I assume if it's coming from me, people are going to believe it, but it's turning out that is not the case. Because the way I see it is like, do you really think I would waste my time to tell you this and waste my breath if I didn't think this was true? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, okay. So if you're okay, let me rephrase then. You get an opportunity to go down there. You're given your druthers as to your choice of scientific.
All right. If they bring me, if I can, here's a good one. If I could go to the site, they were gonna, because we don't know where the site is yet. They haven't made that official. Okay. If they were gonna make, because that would be cultural to me, I would be like, I'll go to the site in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. Okay. So they give you a choice of going to the site where these things are.
Mm-hmm. Or were, yeah.
Or were.
Oh, yeah. I would camp out there probably. Come on.
Now, what do you hope to find? We'll change the question a little bit. What do you hope to find and what do you look for?
Well, going back almost to the other question, I hope to find things that other people didn't see. Right? Because again, I tell my girlfriend first, she's tired of hearing about this stuff for the last year. I can imagine. She's just like, no more tridactyls. But I say this is a 1 in 8 billion theory. There's 8 billion people on Earth. This is a 1 in 8 billion theory based on archaeological evidence and the ancestral narrative, the mythological and cosmological. I ignored the Bible, and now I'm having to go back to the Bible. And it's just like,
I'll give you an example here, Ed. Do you look for the fact that they may be from outer space? Do you look for the fact that they may be an indigenous race, some sort of maybe mammal, or do you look for the fact that they may be an underground race? Do you look to see if?
Okay, yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to finding evidence of a metamorphosis. I believe I found a metamorphosis concealed with steganography in a Persian bas relief. So I look forward to seeing clearer views of Artemis's eggs and seeing if the being does not have a lower appendage, then that being proves my hypothesis about things like Ganesh. Do you know the god Ganesh?
Yeah.
Yeah, we associate Ganesh with the elephant-headed god, right?
Right.
That's actually a misnomer. It's the being who is shaped like the head of an elephant. Put that in your H.P. Lovecraft brain for you know. So why is that? Because their limbs were not formed. They went through. This is part of the my metamorphosis. I'm the only one that has this theory, mind you. My metamorphosis theory is because the lower limbs were formed. One was like a trunk and one was like a tusk. That's why they use the term elephant-like, is referring to limbs that are unformed. And Ganesh is the leader of the Ganas, and the Ganas are like the Yakshas. They're a bunch of little dudes that do whatever you want them to do. They're a powerhouse. One more thing that relates to this is that Ganesh is known as the child in Tamil, and there's an ancient Chinese radical letter called the child, Ji, and guess what it is? Ji is a serpentine kid with a big head.
Oh.
These letters are right there. Not to mention, I've been tracing a phoneme and a letter. I mean, there's a letter called, in some languages, called Ka, and it's two hands that initially started with two tridactyl hands. By the time it gets to Egypt, it's two regular hands, and it's Ka. So I believe Ka, I mentioned it earlier in another letter, is actually, it's a phoneme. It's a sound, but I think it's also the name of this alpha being, this alpha god. So the other thing you asked me about, what do I hope to find? I believe these beings are the demiurge. They are maybe the creators of life on this planet. They may not be the supreme being of the cosmos, but these are your Anunnaki, your Seraphim. These are the beings that went from culture to culture, teaching man everything.
Okay.
And it's a big crazy thing. And this is where we leave. This is where like social science and shamanism are starting to blend with me.
Yeah.
You know, especially when I know I'm seeing the things that people aren't seeing, and I have to explain it to them that it is this perspective anamorphosis. So not only do you have to maybe squint, as I mentioned, with several of these,
Right.
you know, I just found a great cave painting. It's one of my favorite because it's so easy. I'm like, just squint. It's a famous cave painting you've probably seen before with lots of handprints all over it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it turns out that, like many artifacts that we've all looked at all our lives, are concealing tridactyl imagery only made available by the missing knowledge of these beings.
Interesting. There you go.
It's wild, I know. And I know I come on your show and I probably said too much.
No, not at all.
You know, everyone's like, you should break down these things to people, because other symbols like the fleur de lis, paisleys, the cornucopia, all of these things we were probably just primates before them. Without them, we didn't have language. We didn't have writing. We didn't have agriculture. So like, I know there's these human-centric people out there who are saying things like, well, how do you know humans didn't do it? And how dare you dismiss the humans and whatnot? So
we had to have something that led us from loincloths to help us make fire, to help us figure out what a wheel was. I mean, there was something that got us out of the ooze, right? So
yeah, and so that's why too, when people like Lou Elizondo try to beat the war drums and sabers and try to scare people, I'm here to say, yeah, but this is like the mother goddess. So now what?
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? Are you gonna wage war with the mother goddess? Sounds like a great movie, doesn't it?
It does. Sounds like a blockbuster for next summer. That's for sure.
It sounds like a blockbuster. Oh yeah, I would love to see some of this into a movie. I don't know if I should just break down and write a book, but it's hard to write a book when literally like every other day I'm looking at a new artifact. lately it's cave paintings. Cave paintings seem to me to be, ready for this? The cave paintings, when you look closely at them, seem to be complicated pixelated art of multiple layers. So these tridactyls, whether it's the sculptures or the paint, are engaging in something called hybrid imagery. And what I mean by that is, if you see a head, that head is probably the eye to a bigger head. And then that head might very well be the eye of another head. And this is called recursive art, meaning ad infinitum, I don't know if I said that right, infinity, if you zoom into these works of art, you'll see smaller heads. If you zoom out, you might see that the interior of the cave resembles their head, or the exterior of the building resembles like a Zorro mask, a domino mask.
Right.
So I'm planting all these seeds with you. Hopefully you either chase some of these down, or you ask me again to elaborate on some of them.
Well, Ed, where can people find you? What's your website?
Yeah, so my website is tridactyls.com, but really that's kind of static. If you look me up at Tridactyls, and that's TRIDACTYLS, at Tridactyls on Facebook, X, YouTube, and TikTok, you'll see probably the most of my stuff there. TikTok and X, I'm always just putting things on there. And so literally this is the fun thing for me, because Ancient Aliens, Mondonican, In Search of with Leonard Nimoy, I loved all that stuff. So right now I am just living the life, and to be able to discover new artifacts and make these connections every day is just, it's great. It's great. I'm just waiting for everyone to catch up to the biological science, though, because here's the thing. The majority of the world still doesn't know that these things are there and that they're authentic, once living beings. We're not even there yet. And I'm a year into research, full-time research. Imagine this is my job. This is what I've done.
That's amazing.
So it's been a fun year. It was just like, people like, what do you mean by research? I'm like, same research I would have done for my college class, or same research I would have done to teach my high school history class.
Yep.
That kind of research, good old fashioned.
That's right. Well, Ed, I want to thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you so much for
Thanks, man. Thanks for listening, because it's so important for me to get this out of my system every now and then.
That's right. Well, thank you so much. Ed Casas, our guest here on Darkness Radio today. Thank you, Ed.
Live long and prosper.
Thank Ed Casas for being on the program today, talking a little bit about that whole situation with the Nazca mummies. And I still don't know whether they're aliens or they're creatures or they're the Anunnaki or what they are. I'll let you decide. I want to thank as well Jerry, Paulley, and Tracy for getting together and doing that cross programming between us and Hillbilly Horror Stories. I enjoy it quite a bit when we get together with Jerry and Tracy. Hope to do that again soon. Jerry gives opportunities between himself and other shows throughout the year. And again, I look forward to it. I believe he has another opportunity here coming up during the Halloween season, so I may pop onto his show during the Halloween season and do another story for him there. So you can look up Jerry at Hillbilly Horror Stories if you want to check out his podcast. So there you go. Folks, we're coming up on the weekend. Again, be a light in someone's darkness. Plenty of stuff to do out there. If you have someone who is disabled, someone who is elderly, who needs your help, get out there and help. I know it's been a little warm, especially all over the nation, especially here in the Midwest. But we're supposed to get cooler weather this weekend. So it's going to be a nice weekend when you can get out there and help someone with yard work, help someone with housework, help someone who may need it. Of course, it's football season. I've had quite a few of you who have asked me, are we going to do the psychic pups thing? I haven't been able to get a hold of Bruiser in order to ask him if that's even a possibility yet. So I don't believe that's probably going to be an option for this year, but it's something I've wanted to ask Bruiser if maybe even we could start maybe halfway through the season, because I know the pups got a little tired last year. But I don't think that's an option this year, especially not with Bruiser's schedule. So, but we'll throw it past him. The other thing too is if we're going to do it, we need sponsors. So if you know of a sponsor who would want to sponsor the Psychic Pup segment, then by all means contact me, Tim@darknessradio.com. We'll get on that. I think that's about it for this week. Check out the Darkness Radio store, darknessradioshow.com. Jessica Freeberg has 2 new books that are out right now. Check the link in the description of the program and get those 2 books. And in November, I'll be up at the Palmer House with Jessica and the Ghost Stories Inc. folks. They have a 20s themed trip, ghost hunting trip up there. And by all means, it sounds like a good time. I've got to get a zoot suit. I don't think I fit in any suit I have right now because of the weight I've dropped, but I got to try and find a zoot suit for November. So it's bad enough my nephew's getting married next weekend. I'm trying to find a suit for that, but I gotta find a suit for this trip. So it'll be fun. It's going to be a fun time. So get your tickets for that. There's a discount code, Darkness20, for that trip. Click on the description in the link in this show and get your tickets for that as well. I think that'll do it for this weekend, folks. Lots of good shows still coming for you here at the end of September, beginning of October. Like I said, it's going to get a little bizarre, a little dark here as we continue into October. Lots of books that are coming out that are dark. A little eerie. It gets to be a little darker, eerier time this time of year. So looking forward to getting some of this material out to you here in September and October. It's going to be a fun ride. So there you go. So strap yourselves in, folks. We're going to have a good time here in September, October, right here on the best in true crime and paranormal programming. You are listening and watching Darkness Radio.
For more audio and video archives of the show, please visit darknessradioshow.com. Thank you for watching Mucluck 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 Luck. That's all, folks.